Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daycheck with Queen Bee Creations, and I always forget to mention that you can check out our website at queenbeecreationshome.com. That's where I sell all the paint and the molds and the stamps and stencils and all that kind of good stuff that I use, and all kinds of home decor stuff. So check it out. We ship to Canada and the US. If you're outside of that, sorry, don't check me out. I do get people that ask me a lot about molds and, they're a big investment and I don't want to use them just once. What else can I do with them? I mean, I love the molds. Obviously, we use them a lot here, meaning us, for various projects with either air dry clay or perhaps resin. And it's not like one is better than the other. I like both. There are times that I would prefer the clay. There are times that I would prefer the resin. It really depends upon the project more than anything else. But just so that we're clear, these are food grade. You can use them to make chocolates or mold your sugar cookies in. And I've done a video and I give you the perfect recipe for sugar cookies that doesn't spread and leaves all the awesome details. So you can do soaps and chocolates and cookies. There are people that are doing fabulous cakes with fondant in here, or decorating the top of pies with their pastry. So there's a lot of people that aren't using them for craft projects per se, but I mostly do crafts here. So I'm assuming if you're watching me, you're mostly watching for crafts, not for cookie making. Although it was a good video. And they were delicious cookies and super cute. But what I did want to show today is a great other project that you could make. Now, I'm going to mix up some resin for this. This is not an air dried clay. You want them to be really hardy for this because we're going to make buttons. And I have a stash. So you guys know every time I do a resin project, you never mix enough. So I don't want to be short, which means I usually make more than I need, in which case then I always have molds on the side and I pour into the mold so that I always have project pieces. And again, this guy, the deer from one of the Christmas molds, these little antlers are just not worth even trying in the clay. It's crazy. You want to do resin, but there's only one of them on the mold. So every time I do resin, I make enough to pour one of these guys and put them aside in the stash for Christmas. But I want to give you an idea of some other things that you can do. So we're going to start by mixing up resin. This is just a 2-part epoxy resin. I get this isn't a clear glass to show you, but they're the little solo cups. So they've got lines on the inside, and I'm just going to mix up a little because I have a bunch made from my stash. Oh, I forgot that there's 2 lids to these things. I was wondering why it wasn't pouring. I thought, oh, am I that low? Okay. So the only thing about this is not the quick drying. This has to dry overnight. Hence I went into my stash to see if I had what I needed so I can film this all at once rather than waiting overnight. I mean, if I had to wait overnight, I would have. But in the eagerness to get something done and feel like I accomplished something today, getting this totally, well, I'm not going to get it totally finished because I still have to paint, but moving faster through it. There you go. That's it. All right. So with any resin, and it doesn't matter. I mean, this is Epo Artist. I got it off of Amazon. I had never used it before, so it's not like, oh, this is the perfect one to use. It's been great, but I'm sure that there are tons of others that are great. So I'm not recommending this over anything else. Use what you've got. If you want to be able to complete this project quickly, then use the quick dry so that it's ready in like 15 minutes to be able to move on to the next step. Because I have some already hardened, I'm able to move on to the next step and I can just let these dry on their own. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix these, and with any resin, it's gonna be 2 parts. You're gonna mix A and B together, equal parts, and then you're gonna stir. If it's the slow drying stuff that it needs overnight, it's probably gonna be about 3 to 5 minutes. The fast drying stuff, you just want to stir until there's no streaks. You saw that these are kind of 2 different colors, right? One's clear, one's a little bit yellowish, but when you mix them together, you don't see those streaks anymore. Like those, you know, there should be no swirls. It becomes one unified color. For something like this, we're not really going to be worried about air bubbles because we're going to be painting these out. They're not going to be the clear plastic color. There are the quick dry ones that dry white, and there you might be concerned about it just because maybe you're not planning on painting them. Maybe you're planning on using them as white. But most of the new IOD molds will have the amount of resin that you need, right? How many milliliters, etc. for each. So you could calculate how much you need to mix up. I'm too lazy to do that. That's like unnecessary math. I'm gonna mix up a bunch and over pour, meaning I'm gonna pour more things than I need because I'll just put them aside for other projects. So that works for me. If you need it to be exact, then measure it out. But all that we're looking for are molds that have kind of button shapes, that are kind of round shapes. And here I'm doing some that are a little bit bigger. Pouring a big daisy here, so that was a big pour. And I'll go into, and just because I sell IOD doesn't mean that you cannot do this with any mold. So, this is an old Prima mold that I had from long before I was a distributor. I'm still using it, right? You know I don't like to waste anything. I'm not gonna not use it just because I don't carry it. That would be ridiculous. So I'm just going into some that are a good size. And again, you may have to cast this a couple of times because maybe there's one particular shape that you want and you have a project. Maybe you're a knitter and you want to do, you need 6. Well, there's only one that looks exactly like it on each mold. So you're going to have to cast 6 times. But again, if you're a knitter and you're doing this because it's going to work to have cute little customized buttons for each of your outfits, then you're probably going to be casting 6 or 8 of a lot of different molds, right? That you're gonna then amalgamate complete sets. So you're not gonna want to just make a set as you need it. It's kind of like me. You're casting a bunch ahead so that it saves you time in future. So let me get these poured and then off to the side. All right, once you have some of these cast, so I have some button shapes and I have, oh, there's a little leaf shape. Then you want to drill a hole. So you're going to look for a drill bit that is going to work with the size of project that you have. You don't want to have a huge hole in these, but you want it to be big enough that you can sew through it. Rather than drilling from the front to the back, drill from the back, which is flat. Much easier to start. And it actually drills out very easily, very smoothly, and I've never gotten any splitting. So what you want to do though, is you always want to ensure, that's just some dust sitting down in there, but you got 2 nice holes in there. That's just the excess resin you're going to cast off. And you want to make sure that you're drilling down into a board so that when you go through, you're not drilling down into your tabletop. So 2 holes for a button, obviously. However, you may decide that you want to take some of the little leaves, or this is a pine cone, and drill a hole into those. I've already pre-drilled those just with the idea, you know, once you've got the single hole through those, they could become pendants. If they're smaller, they could become earrings. But I'm looking at these as being for future projects where maybe I'm going to tie a little bit of a string through those and dangle these off of maybe a little jar of a cookie mix for a Christmas gift or something like that. So, you know, when I'm involved in one project, I am always thinking ahead to other projects. So if I'm drilling something, I might as well be drilling a bunch of somethings. Now, once you've got your buttons drilled and formed, now you get to finish them off whatever way that you'd like. You can, if you have a specific project in mind, finish them maybe with colors from that. You could prep a bunch ahead. Here I'm painting this in, this is what, brushed steel metallic from Fusion. So Fusion has a great line of metallic paint. So if you're looking for a lot of metallic kind of buttons, couple of coats. The first coat, because the resin cast is kind of slippery, right? So we get our first coat on and let it dry. But, you know, you could take your acrylic paints because they self-seal, or I think I want to do one in coral and just kind of see what that would look like. But maybe let's switch out some colors maybe. I want to embellish them a little bit after, but my first job is to get a couple of coats of paint on them. Once your pieces are painted, you can leave them as is if you just wanted a single color. The other thing is I painted the back of them. You don't have to because they're clear and the color on top reflects out the back. I just thought it looked a little more finished. But you can see on this one, I highlighted a little bit with Golden Rule by DIY. It just kind of, you know, these are a little Christmassy and it gives it a little bit of that Christmassy look to them so that they just sort of finish off that way. You can, instead of using a wax, you could use a gilding wax. These ones are by Annie Sloan. I have a copper, a gold, a silver. So any of these products would work as well, and you can apply them the same with your finger, or you could apply them, I'm just looking at colors and going, let's try the copper. Or you could apply them with a brush. So usually I take it out of the tube. Here I'm just using a little fan brush because if I'm doing it over the blue guy, then I might just want to dust it. And you can see how much more intense this is, or like a rub and buff product, than the gold wax. So the gilding waxes are much more, are much stronger. A little bit more. Once they're dry, they're permanent as well. You could, so now that we're on a roll here, you could, let me try, maybe, I have a black glaze. So this is the glazing medium, the clear glazing medium from Fusion with some black paint added in. So you can take the glazing medium, I've just made this up, and then wipe it away. You could use like a black wax or something if you chose instead, or dark waxes, or make up some colored waxes by mixing your paint into a clear wax, or make them a little bit more pastel by mixing them into a white wax. But up to you. Okay, not my fave.
But you know what? It's one of those things that really depends upon what you're adding it to. Oh, my back perhaps wasn't dry as I'm over eager to get things done. You're not my favorite. But I do like doing, oh, that's gonna be a lot of silver. So sometimes these just pop out. You could take like, let's do this instead of the silver rub and buff, the silver, Annie Sloan glaze. Let's just take silver paint, and you could just take your metallics paint from Fusion and layer it over the other metallics paint from Fusion, right? To get kind of an oxidized looking kind of gold. Instead, you could take like a product from like Annie's gilding wax or rub and buff. I have both, I use both. And just use your fingers instead and highlight the details. This is one of the snowflake molds that I turned into a little button. And again, even if I don't use it as a button, because it's got the holes, I now can add it as a decorative item into anything where I don't want it to necessarily hang. Maybe I'm going to actually cord it through. I'm just looking, kind of going, and I got paint in my holes here, but it does have holes. There we go. So you could put cording through that to be able to add it onto a project instead, right? So you can use it that way as well. So rather than thinking, well, I don't do anything that I'm sewing buttons on to anything with, I'm thinking I like the brighter silver of the gilding wax here instead. But you could layer another color of paint on. It doesn't have to be like a gilding wax or something instead. And you're just hurting. Let's try a little gold over the, we'll go opposite to what we did. So you've got a lot of flexibility with these. You could take a really fine paintbrush and add another layer of color onto it. So you could just dot some little color on there to be able to make it multi-tone, or give it, use some really bold colors, give it more of a bohemian look. Mine are going a little more metallic, and this one just needs to be freshly painted. It needs help.
Now, when it comes to making your buttons, you can really do anything. If I was doing a lot of these all at once, I would have started off spray painting them all. Even just a base coat, just so that they've got some paint on them, and then I can do whatever I'd like. You could, if you were looking to add a bunch of details, we highlighted the details using some waxes and some gilding waxes, things like that. But you could take an acrylic marker and use that instead. If you want them to be glossy, then you could easily top coat them. And again, I probably would use a spray top coat just to make my life easier, because then I'm not having to take a brush to all of them. It all depends on how many you're making and for what use. If you were going to do these and sell them at a market, maybe, so string them onto, like just sew them onto a little card, have the six little buttons on there, then you're going to want to do it as quickly and as effectively as possible to be able to keep your labor costs down. If you're doing them for yourself, then do what makes you happy. I love the idea of some of these and having these made up ahead before the holidays, so that I can, these ones with the single hole, if I'm doing little jars that I'm wrapping jute. Maybe I'm going to tie some of these to the end of the little jute ribbon so that I have them hanging down as a dangle, as a little decorative piece. If you do scrapbooking, you know, some of these buttons you could use as sew it onto your cardstock, and then you have some string to be able to wrap your little book closed. They don't have to be for clothing, right? The buttons could be used for all kinds of different projects where you want to sew them onto something, maybe in card making, or again, if you were making gnomes at Christmas, you want to sew some buttons onto like a big hat or peaked hat, or the buttons on Frosty. And I don't know why I'm thinking of winter and Christmas ideas when it's, summer out here, but it's just the way that my mind is working right now with ideas. So I think that these are a great thing to have a bunch on hand or to be able to whip up very quickly. Once you've cast the resin, drilling holes is lickety split. And if you're starting off by spray painting them, then again, you're going pretty darn quickly. I'm kind of loving these, and I'm already, as you can tell in my head, thinking ahead to where and when and how I could use them. Let me know your thoughts and some uses that you might see for having them and doing them and having them ready on hand. I'm kind of digging it. Looking forward to seeing you on the next one. And until then, take care.